From inside the Banner offices along the Inner Harbor, it is the Banner Baseball Show. Paul Mancano and John Meoli live on a Tuesday morning, an incredibly wet and rainy Tuesday morning as the Orioles prepare for a 3-game series against the Minnesota Twins. But John, I don't know how much of the Orioles series is actually going to get played this week. We'll find out because there's 100% chance of rain today. And you walk outside, you can feel it. You can see it. There's a 95% chance of rain tomorrow. And my question for you, John, is what percentage of your life do you think you've spent, or how many hours at a ballpark during a rain delay, waiting for it to subside?
Gosh, it is a lot. The answer is a lot to that. I find that the part where they're not actually playing the baseball game is like, what are you going to do? Like,
yeah.
But it's a lot harder to not know if you're going to need to go. It's a lot harder when like the things that actually make, that are the most valuable parts of being at the ballpark, which is basically to say like batting practice, aren't happening. If you don't have BP when you're covering baseball and, clubhouse is like 4 hours before the game typically.
Yeah.
So like say a 7:00 game is 3 to 4. If you don't have BP or something happening on the field to make it so you're not sitting in the press box for 3 hours waiting for the game to start after, the manager talks and after clubhouse, like that is the dark time.
Yeah, it is a whole lot of nothing.
It's a really dark time. And the answer is like a lot. I like to think with retrospect, not dealing with it, like, being there every day and like having it be something I had no choice about. I like to think that the person that I was like chill about rain delays, like, cause that's what I'm saying right now. I can't imagine it's actually true.
Yeah.
But if you're gonna nod as I say this, I feel like I'm a person like once I get to the like whatever phase, like when I'm like whatever, then I'm good. But like there's a crescendo of like rage that I need to get to before I hit the whatever phase. So I think I'm just remembering the part where I said whatever.
Yeah,
they'll play or they won't.
And
but
just
I'm sure
it.
I was mad about it at the time.
Yeah, I'm sure you handled it better than some other members of the press corps as well. I've seen some tantrums at times. It can be maddening, I think. And especially, I think the worst was a rain delay during the COVID season because there's truly nothing else going on. There's nobody in the ballpark. None of the concession stands are open. You can't just waste time doing anything else. You just have to sit in your seat and wait it out. And that was horrible.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about that. That was like, there was a day that we weren't in the clubhouse then still. We can go on the field. We could talk to the manager. I think he was 21. We can go on the field and like manager was in person in the dugout and it was like felt like a normal thing to have happen. And there was a day when I got to the ballpark and like as I got there was an email like, oh, it's gonna rain, we're gonna do everything on Zoom. And I was like, great, I'm just here for 4 hours now. Like it's raining, I can't go home. Like I think I scooted to the ballpark, I can't go home. Like this is an absolute disaster. And that was a moment that that was a seminal moment for me.
Yeah, well, on that very light topic, we're going to talk about the Orioles getting a little bit healthier, try to brighten this rainy day. We're also going to talk about the struggles that Adley Rutschman has had and whether we should be concerned about his 2025 season or perhaps optimistic that it will turn itself around. But first, let's get a word from our sponsor.
For the 5th year in a row, Toyota is the best resale value brand according to Kelley Blue Book's KBB.com, including the 2025 Grand Highlander, best in resale value for midsize SUVs. Toyota, let's go places.
All right, John, you wrote about on the BaltimoreBanner.com where people can subscribe $1 for 6 months about how the Orioles are getting healthier. It's been a problem since midway through the 2024 season. The Orioles have been a very unlucky, unhealthy team. They got some guys back over the weekend. Tyler O'Neill returned over the weekend. Zach Eflin returned yesterday, or Sunday, I should say, pitched 5 innings with 2 earned runs. They absolutely needed that for their rotation. Jordan Westberg, who's got a strained hamstring, could be playing for AAA Norfolk later this week, could be back in the Orioles lineup maybe next week. Ramon Arias could return to the Orioles lineup this week. Andrew Kittredge is appearing in rehab outings for AAA Norfolk. He made his second one over the weekend, and it went pretty well. They're getting generally healthier. That's the good. The bad is that they've dug themselves into a pretty deep hole right now. They are 15-24. They're in last place in the AL East. And yes, these reinforcements will help, but they have a lot of ground to make up at this point. And you wrote about the headline was the Orioles are getting healthier, but the damage is already done.
Yes, and I think that part of the reason, honestly, I think from our podcast last week when you talked about the reasons that also a lot of the circumstances why some of these young guys were like forced to sink or swim, and we taught you mentioned it's because they signed Charlie Morton and he stinks, and because the righties can't hit, and it's like also because they're really hurt.
Yeah.
And like this is a hurt team, and it's challenging to sit in a position like we're sitting in and give that like the value, the proper amount of like credibility and I don't think credence is the word, but like to say that everything would be fine if they were hurt is a complete disservice to anyone with eyes and a brain who has watched this team play badly for as long as they have. And to say that the injuries, it doesn't matter that they're hurt because they signed Charlie Morton and Gary Sanchez is a terrible backup catcher. Like you can't be like, no, you're wrong. Like that stuff is a large part of the reason why they are in the position they're in right now. The issue is that they have lost a lot of games in this point. I mean, I've tried to do the math in my head. Speaking yesterday with our friends the On the Verge podcast, but like basically you have to win, you'd be like 5-6 games over 500 in the next 3 quarters of the season to be anywhere near a playoff team, which is doable. I don't know how many wins and losses that equates to in these like 40 game chunks, but you need to play really good baseball and have zero margin for error. And I felt it was important to acknowledge that like this is going to get better because they're going to have better players available to them, and it might not matter. This might have sunk their season, and it happened last year too, honestly.
Right. If the guys that were healthy were performing at an above average level, you would be more optimistic about their ability to mount a second half comeback or 3 quarters of the season comeback. But the problem is you have a lot of guys who are healthy, who are struggling. We're going to talk about Adley Rutschman in a bit. Gunnar Henderson hit a big home run against the Angels in the series finale, but those 2 guys have been struggling. Those 2 guys are expected to be 2 of your better hitters on the team. Yeah. Ryan Mountcastle has been struggling mightily. Tyler O'Neill just got back healthy and he has struggled at times. So it's not like Jordan Westberg, Colton Cowser can come back and single-handedly carry this team. You still need the guys that are healthy right now to perform well. And so that is the frustrating thing. And going back to last year, in the second half of last year, you also saw a ton of injuries affect this team, particularly in the pitching staff, but also in the lineup. You saw Arias go down for time. Westberg obviously broke a bone. You saw Mountcastle go out for an extended amount of time. And you could look at that and convince yourself that the Orioles would be able to, once they got fully healthy, make a run in the playoffs. And the fact that they were 33-33 in the second half of the season was just because of the injuries. But then you took a deeper dive and you said, oh, Adley Rutschman is struggling mightily in the second half. Gunnar Henderson is not quite at the same level of production in the second half that he was in the first half. So it's a combination of things. It's not just the fact that they're not healthy right now. It's they're not healthy, and the guys that are healthy are not doing well.
Correct. Yeah, I think, and the distinction I make is that, the reason that you use all the picks they did on good hitters is that the more good hitters you have, the more wiggle room there is for somebody to have them like in April, like Ryan Mountcastle did. Like he seems like he's picking it up a little bit, and it's okay because he's picking it up as Cedric Mullins is coming back down a little bit. Cedric Mullins has a good April, Ryan Mountcastle has a bad April. These things kind of flip. This isn't to say that the players that the Orioles are counting on, I think Heston Kjerstad was a huge beneficiary of the injuries that happened in April with Tyler O'Neill not being 100%, Colton Cowser not playing after the first weekend. He has not played well. That is a reality. But to have those players back means that it's not as glaring if Ryan Mountcastle has the month that he has, because if you have 8 legitimate good everyday players in the lineup, and all your lefty mashers are mashing lefties, it doesn't matter as much when that happens. What happens when you do have those injuries and guys are out of the lineup, to me at least, and this is kind of, you remember those days when like it was it was Cedric Mullins and Austin Hayes and Anthony Santander and Trey Mancini and Ryan Mountcastle maybe, and then there was 4 or 5 guys in the lineup who were terrible.
Yep.
And if they didn't score when that top pocket was up at the plate, they weren't going to score for 3 innings because there was no other way for them to generate any kind of offense. So that pressure just mounts. when there's not guys who can pick up that load, I think that it makes it a little more stressful.
Yeah.
Adley Rutschman, we're going to talk about. Gunnar Henderson, I would just point out that we did this last week. And I wrote the newsletter, he had faced like the highest percentage of left-on-left pitches of any regular in baseball, which is not going to happen all the time, but it's very drastic. He's right-left splits this year. He's basically an elite hitter against righties, and he's having a tough time against lefties, and that's doing it. Otherwise, you're talking about guys who have been uneven. Cedric Mullins was really good. He has fallen off. Jackson Holliday did not start well. He is hitting the ball well now. Ryan Hornhern's hitting throughout. Heston Kjerstad not been as good. You're talking about a lot of back and forth and ups and downs, and there's a little more cushion to that bounce when there's more players to shoulder that load.
Exactly. In terms of the rotation, obviously getting Zach Eflin back in this rotation was absolutely massive, and now you feel like you have at least 2 starting pitchers in Zach Eflin, Tomoyuki Sugano, that you feel okay about when they take the ball. So that's 2 out of 5 in your rotation, but then you have 3 other guys that are not really carrying their weight, and sometimes 4 other guys, depending on how the Orioles have used their rotation. But you are starting to get some guys come off their rehab assignments and pitch for AAA. Trevor Rogers, I know it's Trevor Rogers, but his rehab assignment has ended, and he actually pitched okay in his last start for AAA, 4 1/3, giving up just 1 earned run. Chase McDermott, his rehabs are done, 4 innings, 1 earned run on Friday in his last start. And then Brandon Young is still on the IL down in Norfolk with shoulder discomfort. But when you look at the struggling guys in the Orioles rotation, Charlie Morton obviously has only filled in as a starter when he's absolutely needed to. I think the Orioles would like to keep him in the bullpen for the time being. But Kyle Gibson struggled as well over the weekend. Cade Povich, we were hoping would take strides in his last start, and he did not. Do you feel like Trevor Rogers, Chase McDermott could come up and spell one of those guys? Or do you think, the Orioles are just going to kind of stick with what they got until somebody else goes down with injury?
I think that Charlie Morton will not pitch in the rotation again unless there's some kind of disaster that happens, like kind of what happened last week where, Dean Kramer.
Those things tend to happen to the Orioles.
Yes,
Disasters?
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. I think Kyle Gibson will get the chance to figure it out. I'm not sure they're going to be doing any kind of widespread changes. I think Cade Povich's spot would be the one that's vulnerable. I wonder if they can find a pocket where they're like, oh, we're facing this team that doesn't have a lot of, lefties in their lineup. Then we're facing another. Like, if they can line up the spots in the rotation, or maybe you get some favorable matchups for Chase McDermott. You say, all right, Cade, go take a breath. Like, let's, this has been a lot this month. That's something I could see, but I'm looking up as we're talking about how the, what Trevor Rogers was actually throwing and how that went in the start on Sunday. I'm not really sure we're going to glean anything based on that, but I'm going to find out the answer anyway.
Yeah. And I have been, I think fair to say, discouraged by the numbers that Trevor Rogers has put up in AAA so far. I mean, his velocity just may never be anywhere close to what it was during his best years with the Marlins. Really his only one good year with the Marlins, which was 2021.
Yeah.
And if he comes up and he's still throwing 89-mile-an-hour fastballs, I just don't know if that's any better than what the Orioles currently have.
Yeah, up to 94 on Sunday.
Okay.
Was it Sunday, Saturday? Because the 11th was Mother's Day, and that was the day before, the 10th. Up to 94, average 92.5. It was
okay.
Like 0.6 of a mile an hour on average, harder than it was. He got 6 whiffs, which is not a ton. Overall, you can, I don't know. I would be interested to dig into it more. It's just not something that's been front of mind right now.
Yeah.
He has gotten to the point, and I think this is, fair to say, like, if he gets here, we'll consider it then. I don't think I'm driving the Trevor Rogers. I don't think I was ever driving the Trevor Rogers.
No.
Bus. Let me be clear. Although I did think they would trade for him, I thought they would trade for him.
You did.
Far lesser players.
You made that prediction.
I definitely
last trade deadline.
I got that part right, and I got the value for him wrong.
I think Mike Elias maybe got the value for him wrong as well. Again, if we just swap the return that the Orioles sent for Zach Eflin and for Trevor Rogers, you feel great about their trade deadline last year.
Do we do this when we said if they combine those two trades? If you said Zach Eflin and Trevor Rogers for Connor Norby and Kyle Stowers and
Yeah.
Jackson Baumeister and Matt Horvath and Matthew Etzel. That feels like maybe like $1.20 for a dollar, but you're not feeling terrible. And I would, I don't know who else you want to add to that. Like if you want to say like Austin Hayes versus Anthony Dominguez in that too, that's a very complicated equation that might even make sense. I don't know if I'm going to go there with the Moises Chase and Seth Johnson for Gregory Soto, but I will say that if you put those two starting pitchers in the same trade, that you just traded all those 5 prospects to Florida, the state, and got back 2 starting pitchers who could help you. You might do that.
The problem though is that they were separate deals, and you made the Zach Eflin deal before you made the Trevor Rogers deal. So you could have just gotten out of there with 1 win and kept Kyle Stowers and Connor Norby and not have had Trevor Rogers come back. However, if you look at it on the aggregate, fine. The Orioles came out of that trade deadline. Okay.
Yeah. As you're talking about, I know we're trying to talk about Adley Rutschman. As you're talking about, was Mike Elias wrong? It's like when you write about what the Orioles do, like I feel like I'm doing a lot of self-reflection of what have I been wrong about. Like writing just after that Friday, we're like traded for Sir Anthony Dominguez, traded for Zach Eflin. Like if the Orioles want to be done, they could be done. Like no truer words have been written by the fingers in my life. Like if they just didn't do any of the stuff they did after that, when they were just like, it seemed like they were like, oh, trade deadline's in an hour. Like let's let it rip. Like, what do we got? Who's on the phone? Like you call so-and-so, Sig. Anybody else want to make some calls? And they just make like 5 ridiculous trades in like span of like an hour and a half. And if they didn't do any of those, everyone probably feels a little bit better about pretty much everything.
Yeah. Hey, Austin Slater he made the playoff roster. We can't forget that. But I don't know if that 1 week from Eloy Jimenez really changed the tide for that Orioles team in the second half. All right, let's talk about Adley Rutschman. Let's talk about the season that he's having so far, because the counting numbers are not great. He's hitting .203 with 4 homers and a .636 OPS. He's also got just 4 doubles. And if you look at his StatCast page, it's a mix of bright red and pale blue. The positives on his StatCast page: 70th percentile or better in expected batting average, expected weighted on base percentage, expected slugging percentage, and K percentage. So he's not striking out. And according to StatCast, he should be hitting better than he is in terms of batting average. He's in the 79th percentile or better in K percentage and walk percentage. So he's walking a lot as well. He is in the 95th percentile or better in whiff percentage, chase percentage, and squared up percentage. So he is not missing, he's making contact, and he's not chasing. Then you look at the blue on his StatCast page. He's in the 38th percentile in average exit velo, 30th percentile in hard hit percentage, and 26th percentile in bat speed, which is a metric that they've added on StatCast within the last 2 years. So what does that tell you? To me, John, I look at that and I say he's elite at making contact. He's making solid contact. He's just not hitting the ball hard. He's not driving it far. And it drives with the eye test too, because so many times this season we have seen him barrel up a baseball, hit a ball squarely. For example, in that Angels series, I think there were several times, one where he flew out on a home run robbery. That is a ball that I think if he hits harder, he made great contact, but he didn't hit it hard enough. I mean, that ball is out because he hit it about as well as you could possibly hit it, but he didn't hit it hard enough. So when you look at this season that Adley Rutschman is having, are you encouraged or are you discouraged by the kind of year that he's had so far?
I think at this stage, batting average. All these things are real, and all of these things are kind of who Adley Rutschman is at this point. He's never been somebody who hit the ball in the big leagues incredibly hard. He's never been somebody who, I think this is among the better hard hit rates he's had in his career. Even when he was really, really good last year in the first half, he was somebody who average exit velocity in the first half was 88.8, which is lower than it is now. His hard hit rate was 40.4, which I believe is a little higher than it is now.
When he was hitting a ton of home runs.
He was hitting a ton of home runs. What we saw, I think it's fair to say, is that there were some things there were things in his swing that were the way he was hitting the ball. He was basically just trying to jack everything up in the air and that's how he was trying to get it out. And there's been some adjustments to, I think, stop that. And you're seeing you're seeing like the platonic ideal of like what Adley Rutschman would want to do, which is take good at bats. And that's always what he was, I don't think I should have gone back and looked in like what like the scouting reports and stuff were, and what some of my notes were from like after he was drafted. I know he was after the Orioles drafted him, he started hitting the ball a little harder, like almost immediately. I'm not trying to say that this is not what we were not sold like some kind of like, hard contact machine masher type guy, because we probably were. I think that what we're seeing now is that there's just not as much margin for error, and you can have bad batted ball luck, and you can have, you can slug lower than you should if you're not hitting the ball as hard as you want to.
Right. I think since this in the StatCast era, and something that really everybody has discovered over the last 20 or so years, and this is just a baseball truism, you have to hit the ball hard in order to get on base consistently. It's hard hit balls that end up over the fence for home runs. It's hard hit balls that find holes because you're either smashing it on the ground past an infielder or you're smashing it to a gap in the outfield. Is it possible to be hitting the ball as softly as Adley Rutschman is hitting it and be a consistently good hitter?
Yes, it is, because I'm looking at his Fangraphs page right now. Yes, no, I think it is, because like he had a 135 WRC plus in his rookie year. He had a 127 the year after that. In the first half of last year, it was probably that high. I don't have the splits up, but we're talking about somebody who has hit the ball at that level for his entire big league career and has been good since it was good until, I would argue that he's not good now, but he was definitely not good in the second half last year. Up until then, he was good. He is underperforming what should be probably fine right now. So I think you can do that. I think there are questions about that type of player's role in the lineup. Like, do you want him to be like more of a table setter type, and have Gunnar Henderson be the one who's just swinging, really hard and hitting the ball really far? Like, yes, you could do that. So I think you can do that. I think the challenge is that we're not coming up on a year. We're closer to a year than we want to be, of wondering like, why is this player who is meant to be the foundation of all this not performing to that level?
Yeah, he's got 0.2 WAR, and every season since his rookie year, his WAR has gone down, and his production peaked in the first half of last year, and then he went into a tailspin in the second half of last year. You don't see him making the kind of, I think mentally he was struggling in the second half of last year, and never more was it more apparent than when he was playing in that Royals series and he came up in the second game with the Orioles with their backs against the wall, and he took a 2-0 strike right down the middle. And that moment has been used as an example of just how in his head he was at the time. I don't think we're seeing that right now. I mean, you see him make solid contact, and a lot of times it's just finding the fielders. It's just finding a glove, but he's not driving the ball over the fence, and his doubles are way down. I mean, his double total has gone down each of the last 3 years. And for a guy that was taken 1-1, Gunnar Henderson has surpassed Adley Rutschman in terms of WAR. He is, arguably a more valuable player to a franchise than Adley Rutschman is. Fine. But Adley Rutschman still has to be one of your most valuable players.
Yes.
And the fact that he is only slightly above 0 in terms of WAR is concerning, because this is a guy that we were talking about before the season. This is the offseason you extend him. He is supposed to be your franchise player. He is your captain, so to speak. He is an annual all-star. He is the face of your team in a lot of ways, and yet his numbers are not backing it up. And when he's 27, it's not like you can say he's especially young, and he's honestly closer to free agency than he is to his major league debut. So it really is a bit concerning that somebody who should be carrying your lineup right now is not able to put up the counting stats that would be, equivalent to an all-star.
Yeah, and I think those are the things that you look at and you say, okay, is this really, is this something that is sustainable? Like the extra base hits. I wasn't watching on Sunday. It was Mother's Day. There's not a lot of baseball you could watch.
Wow, how dare you spend time with your wife?
It was great. We had a fantastic time. And when I had the opportunity to check in on the game, and I saw go to game day, and it's like sharp fly ball triple, and I was, hey Adley, there you go. And then I watched it, and I was like, okay,
yeah,
never mind.
Had an expected batting average of probably 0.15.
Yeah, not the kind of thing. But there's not those kinds of, like, those fly balls are not landing. I'm not sure what makes them land. But if they're not going over the fence and they're not landing, that's challenging. There's a world where Adley Rutschman is just like a double machine, and it's okay that he's not hitting those home runs in the way that you thought. I don't know what the solution is. As you're talking, I'm scrolling through scrolling through all these pages. He pulls the ball in the air well, which is what you do to have power. He makes great swing decisions. He's doing everything that you want to have happen. And I think if we were basing this, if he was like performing in line with like what the expected things were, we would be having a little bit of a different conversation. But the fact that the Orioles offense as a whole has stopped being what it was, as Adley Rutschman has stopped being what it was, is going to be one of those like chicken and egg things that I think you're going to have a really hard time splicing out. I know I do. I know that for somebody who is when we're sitting here talking about expected stats and like what Fangraph says and all this stuff, and like we're going to get into like we're talking about something that might be like spiritual and like just like human in a way that you can't quantify. And honestly, when I think about Adley Rutschman, that's kind of where I go with all this.
He is more important spiritually than he is statistically?
No, I think maybe no. I don't. I think that Adley Rutschman and I've told the story, I'm sure, on this podcast, and I've written about it a million times. Like when we were doing like the draft profile, one of his like travel ball coaches told me he used the concept of like mudita, like somebody who experiences joy by other people experiencing joy. So like Adley Rutschman, it's all platitudes. It's all literally like sports junk. Like, oh, that guy loves winning. Like that guy wants to win. He loves his teammates. He'll do everything to win. Like that's all sports junk, like I said, and that might actually just be the truth with Adley Rutschman. Like he is somebody who, no matter what happened physically, no matter what's happened, like, mentally, like this is a person who, as the Orioles were ascending and everything was going well, he was going really well. And then, some of his friends started getting hurt, like things started going badly around him last year. And I don't think that it's a coincidence that he performed the way that he did. I think that that's undermined a little bit by the fact that like he should be doing like performing better. Last year, he just stopped hitting the ball hard. Like, even for his standards, was not hitting the ball hard, was not making good contact. I think the fact he's underperforming this year makes it a little challenging to like buy that theory. But this has also been a really hard start to the season, like for the Orioles as a team. I think they are not whole as a lineup. They are not whole with like that core group of guys. Like they're all hanging out before games, but then like two of them aren't playing. It's not fun. So I think there's a part of that you just can't overlook. There's a concept of like ceiling raisers and floor raisers. And the Orioles drafted Adley Rutschman. Everyone knew that Bobby Witt had like superstar potential, but I think there was a very, very real case that like you knew Adley Rutschman was going to be a good big league catcher for a long time. And I don't think anybody's going to argue with that. But when I say ceiling raisers and floor raisers, like he might be someone that is able to make a good team better. And he might be somebody who if things are not as good as you want them to be around him, he might not be able to not be able to lift the floor in the way that you would expect when you're talking about a player who has a pretty high floor value-wise.
Yeah. And somebody who also, like you said, you would look more to his floor than you would his ceiling, because somebody who doesn't hit the ball that hard, how high could his ceiling really be? I mean, Gunnar Henderson was their second round pick in that draft, and he was taken out of high school, and it was a low floor, high ceiling guy,
yes.
And he hit his ceiling. He was outstanding, and you look at his StatCast page, he is the exact opposite of Adley Rutschman, and especially the second half of 2024, Gunnar Henderson into this year. Gunnar Henderson, I don't think is going to ever put up the low K rates that he did in the first half of last year. I think we're seeing a lot more swing and miss from Gunnar Henderson. We're seeing him chase a lot more than we saw at times when he was at his absolute best second half of last year.
Yeah.
But that swing and miss also comes with ridiculous exit velos. It comes with ridiculously hard hit balls, and it comes with home runs that shouldn't be home runs for any other player because he's Gunnar Henderson. Gunnar Henderson hit his ceiling. I wonder if Adley Rutschman, clearly his ceiling is an all-star. He has been an all-star before. He had 5.4 WAR a few years ago. He's a 2-time all-star. But I just wonder if his ceiling is anywhere close to that of Gunnar Henderson, and certainly it's not going to be, I think, close to, unfortunately, what Bobby Witt Jr.'s is.
Yeah, I mean, that's, I was thrilled that Bobby Witt Jr. did not have like a great weekend when they came here, because I was just like,
oh, the narratives.
It's like spare us all that. There's enough things that turn our stomachs at this point where the Orioles are concerned. It's hard. You don't want to lower the bar for these players and this team, because they are the reason that the bar is so high. And just because they're not meeting it doesn't mean you're like, oh, it's not like you're playing limbo with a 4-year-old, like raising it when they go under to make it feel like they're not bonking their head on it. But if Adley Rutschman starts performing to the expected stats, if he has like a 3.5 win season, that's fine. That's, it's not what Gunnar Henderson is going to. It's not what 2022, 2023 Adley Rutschman did. But that's fine. Like, that is something that the Orioles can live with and win with. And it feels like his start to the season, specifically as we're talking about 2025, is a lot like the team as a whole, where like you can say that it's different from last year. You can say that it's different from how things fell apart last year. And you could also not. Like, you can take that however you want to take it. If you want to say this is a team that, this was always a ticking time bomb, and the offense was always going to fall apart, like, I don't believe you. Like, I don't think that you could have watched a team, and I'm going to say team, and I'm talking about Adley Rutschman too. I think that's the point, is that you can say all the same things you're saying about the Orioles about Adley Rutschman. Like, you can't watch him destroying the ball in the first half of the year, much like his teammates, much like the team, and be like, that guy's going to completely fall off a cliff. Like, maybe you could have said he hit too many, like he was like hitting too many home runs, which I don't understand is a thing. Everyone would love to hit too many home runs. I don't think you can look at all the stuff that you're seeing with Adley Rutschman and the Orioles as a whole and be like, this was always going to be this worst case-ish scenario. It might have been overperforming a little bit, not to the extent that it has. And I think that now that we're into like having had the whole second half of last year and the start of this year meshed together, we're talking about things that are a little harder to push back on and a little harder to feel good about rationalizing. Like, all the stuff we're saying about like what should be happening and what could be happening is true. All the stuff you're saying about like, if you don't hit the ball hard, you're not going to have the results you want are true. And if it was only this year, it would feel different. If it was only last year and he was doing what he was supposed to, like if he was performing to the expectations this year, that would have been a blip. Because we're putting it all together, and this is the same thing for the Orioles as a whole, it's just really uncomfortable having to decide whether you want to say this is a thing now or this is still not a thing.
Right. I wonder if we'll see a season like his rookie year again. And I think it's frustrating because if the trajectory were reversed, if Adley Rutschman had this kind of season in his rookie year and his WAR was steadily increasing every year, we would feel so much better about where he is as a player. And you'd feel much more likely, if you're an Orioles fan, you definitely want to be looking to extend that guy. You definitely want to be making that guy the face of your franchise. Yeah. But his rookie year was his best year. The season in which he came up in the middle of May, I think it was Preakness weekend, was when he made his MLB debut.
Yes.
As we are coming up on Preakness weekend in Baltimore here. But his rookie year, 5.4 WAR in just 113 games. He had an 806 OPS. He hit 254. He had 13 homers. And then his next year, a little bit less WAR, 4.3 WAR, and he hits 277 with 20 homers and an 809 OPS. And then last year, the great first half, the down second half. And now you're getting a very down month and a half to start the 2025 season. So the fact that the arrow right now is pointing down is concerning. But at the same time, I do think that we will see some leveling out. I do think we will see some of those balls start to drop. I do think that Adley Rutschman will be the beneficiary of better luck. And it's not like there's not a precedent for guys that don't have this profile to do well. Alex Bregman hasn't hit the ball hard in the last couple of years. That's part of the reason he had to settle for a shorter term deal with Boston.
Yeah.
But he's still a very, very good hitter. He's never had, at least the last several years, once he entered his late 20s and into his 30s, hasn't had great bat speed or exit velo, but does not chase, does not strike out much, does not whiff, and walks a lot, and squares the ball up a lot. And that makes him a very valuable hitter. Brendan Donovan, who is a kind of rising star for the St. Louis Cardinals, is having a very similar season. His exit velos aren't great, but he's hitting over 300, and he's being viewed as a outside, first half MVP candidate on a very good team. So I think Adley is just because of the profile that he has right now. And it's weird to say, because I think usually you look at guys who are more subject to chance and subject to luck as guys who are more power over contact guys. And Adley Rutschman is not that right now. But I do think Adley is a little bit subject to bad luck. The kind of profile that he has built, because he's putting so many balls in play, it's just a matter of if those balls are going to find grass or not. And so I do think we're going to see some leveling out. It just concerns me that this is now a prolonged stretch going back to last June, July, that Adley Rutschman has not hit the ball hard and is not producing.
Yeah. It feels like, it feels almost fitting as we're talking about his first 2 years that he ended with basically 800 OPSs, because you can't have an OPS that starts with an 8 and be like, nope, not 8. Although I did have done that about Anthony Santand last year.
Well, his OBP was 308
because he had 40 some home runs and still had an 815 OPS.
Yeah.
So I'm, hand up hypocrite right here. But that feels like, when he did that, he's walking 13% of the time. He has 50 extra base hits. It doesn't need to be homers, but you are driving the ball and you're getting extra base hits. If you walk 13% of the time and have 50 extra base hits and you play every day, you're going to have an 800 OPS and you're going to have a good season. That feels like what the floor should be. And we're talking about now somebody who, because of, we can call it an extended run of bad luck. We can call it an extended run of, batted ball luck. But because the power part and the extra base hits have not been there, he is not producing at that level. And that means that it does, it almost feels like it's it doesn't matter. If he has an 800 OPS, it's good. If he doesn't, it's not good. And that's kind of an okay standard to hold the one your core player to me. I think that's a fine standard to hold him to.
Yeah. And we don't need to get into the Bobby Witt versus Adley Rutschman debate now.
Yeah, I'll pour this coffee all over the recording equipment. Don't even start with me, Paul.
All right, we're not doing that. It's going to be fascinating to see how the rest of Adley Rutschman's season goes. And by all accounts, we have covered Adley since even before he was drafted by the Baltimore Orioles, when he was viewed as a prospect and the bona fide number one prospect coming out of Oregon State. And from a personality perspective, from a work ethic perspective, Adley Rutschman is an 80 on the 20 to 80 scale. He is in the clubhouse as a worker, everything that the Orioles expected he would be and more. And he has, never said the wrong thing in the times that we've been talking to him. He has done the right thing on and off the field. And so it is frustrating to see him go through this. And it's also frustrating for people that just kind of take a cursory glance at his stats and make judgments about the kind of season he's having.
Yeah.
But I also know that Adley is not one that will particularly let this bother him.
Yeah. Have we talked about process recently? Have I shared my process theory?
I don't think so.
Okay. So Adley, when this whole thing started, it was all growth mindset and process oriented.
Yeah.
Adley was always growth mindset. I don't know what that means. I think he did. I think he just didn't want to say it. But he is very there. He is, and they are. He and the Orioles, again, same thing. Very process oriented. If I do this consistently and work on this consistently, and this is my routine, and this is what I'm trying to do, I'm doing this because this is what the results say will happen over time if you do these things. And he is an adherent to that. I think it's fair to say. And I know that as a team they are. That's why they believe what they believe hitting wise. I was very I was glad that someone said it out loud other than me when Cody Ashley said this weekend, we don't really do anything different than we did last year. We believe what we believe and we're different people, but we don't do anything differently. That's pretty much what I expected to happen. And I'm glad to know that it is happening. I think that it's really hard when you have these beliefs and you think, if I'm doing this consistently well, it will lead to good results. And then that doesn't happen. There's not really an off ramp when you're process oriented, because you can iterate your processes and you can improve them and you can change things that don't work and you can take away things that don't work. But if you stray too far from that, then you are not following the process that you believed in, that your whole, not being, but your whole
essence.
Yeah, if that is your foundation for success, and you're like, well, it doesn't work anymore, I'm going to change it. Like, you're opening a whole can of worms, and like, it doesn't feel like, I know Adley Rutschman did some things with the swing to try to be better this year. I know the Orioles have done some small things to change how the offense works as a whole, but the process is the process, and I'm not sure a stretch like this where it's not working is going to make that change. It's just also not going to feel or look good when it's not working.
Yeah, I lied. We did talk about process last week, but I wanted you to talk about it again because I think it's.
Did you lie or did you just forget?
Maybe a little bit of both.
Okay,
we won't say.
But I only have like 5 things that I just say and write, and so like I just assume that I've said everything.
Yeah, I mean, look. All baseball players, to a certain extent, are process over results. They have to be, because baseball is a luck versus unluck sport. I mean, it is a sport where you could hit the ball hard 5 times and go 0 for 5, and the next night you hit a couple bloops and you're able to get on 4 times out of 5. So you have to trust the process at a certain point over the results. It's just that and you can't, if you're gonna go in on the process that they have, you can't. The phrase I've heard is, you can't date analytics, you have to marry them. You can't just pick and choose what you want to incorporate. You have to stick with it and see it through. And there's a fine line between being reactionary and being reactive. And you don't want to be reactionary. You want to be reactive to what goes on. So when the body of results reaches a critical mass to the point where you need to change something, you need to be able to adapt. But the Orioles right now, clearly, in the way that they're thinking, their brain trust, and Adley Rutschman is probably part of this, is not at that point right now.
Yeah.
They are still at the stage where they want to stick with what they have.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of where it's at with Adley and the team as a whole. And I don't know what else to say about
There's
it.
not much else
about Adley Rutschman.
We have. This was our Adley Rutschman podcast. I do want to give. I think I'm starting a segment on here, John, a weekly segment about a minor league check-in.
Cool. Let's do it.
How does that sound?
I look forward to the part of the season when like one thing happens, good or bad, like the Orioles either like stabilize and like it'll be okay to think about and go to the minor leagues, or they're so bad that it's like we're back to this. This is like, all right, let's go. Like, what's next?
This might just turn into a minor league podcast at some point. Let's hope it doesn't get to that point. Let's talk about Braxton Bragg, who is a 24-year-old right-hander who the Orioles took in the 2023 draft with an 8th round pick. He pitched well for Single A Delmarva last year, and he made just 3 starts in High A Aberdeen this year before the Orioles yanked him on up to Double A Chesapeake this year, where he's got a 1.56 ERA so far. Braxton Bragg has been excellent, and for all of the talk that we've had on this podcast about how the Orioles have failed to draft a pitcher who has made his big league debut in Baltimore, of the 65 guys that they've drafted, I'm looking at this 2023 draft. John, I know this is a draft class that you have looked at heavily. You got some arms in there. Yep. Braxton Bragg is one of them. Michael Ferret, who unfortunately got injured, is in there as well. Nestor Herman. You got some guys that actually might be able to save this rotation beyond the 2025 season.
Yeah, we'll add Zach Fruits to that list. He's also injured, unfortunately, but Levi Wells has been pitching a lot better in Bowie for the Chesapeake Bay Sox.
There we go.
That was a good catch. I think that we're going to look back on that draft class similarly to. Okay, this is a wild thing to say, and I don't think I actually believe it, but I'm going to say it anyways. We're going to look back on this similarly like the 2019 draft class for hitters.
Whoa.
Wow, that is not so, maybe not because of the impact, but because of the inflection point that it represented. And like, all right, like this is, people look at the results of that draft class and have spent, and we can argue whether that's true or not, like have spent a lot of time since then being like, the Orioles know what they're doing for hitters.
The Orioles, Mike Elias set the bar really high in his first draft.
Yeah, and they've also like continued to, like, they got 3 big leaguers out of the 5 COVID picks or 6 COVID picks. Like, that's pretty good. Colton Cowser is pretty good. Connor Norby's I think it was 12 big league hitters in the first 3 drafts, which feels like a lot.
It is a lot.
That is a lot. Yes, that is a lot, Paul. And I think we're going to talk about the amount of talent on the mound that came out of the 2023 draft similarly. Now, Braxton Bragg, he was one of those guys that's making like off-season calls, like putting together the Baseball America list. He was always somebody that people were like, oh, he was nice. Like, I was a nice guy, but you kind of almost listen. This happened outside the organization. Like, he spent all of last year in Delmarva, and you take that for what it is. They moved up a lot of pitchers at different points. Michael Frett moved up. Luis De Leon moved up. Zach Fruit didn't leave Aberdeen the whole year. That was probably limiting. Levi Wells didn't leave Aberdeen the whole year. There's only so many spots for these guys. And it turned out in the moment that the way to get Braxton Bragg, who was a reliever for 3 years, transferred to Dallas Baptist as a senior and became a starter, and then was in basically his second year as a starter. The way to get him platformed, like innings-wise, the way they wanted to, was to leave him in Delmarva, because that was where the opportunity to pitch extended outings was. So he stayed there, and he was a better pitcher in Delmarva. He was always somebody who could fill up the zone, attacks hitters, scouts like the body, scouts like the, his mentality on the mound. I don't know if I said that. I might have just repeated myself. And from college to last year, he added like 2 ticks to his fastball, which is good. You're like, okay, cool. Every Orioles, the Orioles did what they do, which is add like a cutter. A lot of guys add 2 seamers now in their first full year, and your arsenal improves off season. Add 2 more miles an hour. So then you're going from like low 90s to mid 90s, adds a kick change, which everyone is doing. And all of a sudden you have somebody who's sitting like over 95 up to 98 this year. And that is much like the rest of these guys we're talking about from this draft class specifically, and all the guys who have kind of distinguished themselves on the pitching side. You have a lot of ingredients. You're like, when you look at them in a vacuum, you're like, all right, this guy's fastball is hard, and he locates it, and it plays well in the zone. He has multiple ways to get guys out, lefties and righties. And the Orioles looked at the success he was having basically from the moment he reported to minor league camp. We're like, yeah, we didn't promote him last year. That might have been something that we could have done, but like, let's not let that inform what needs to happen now, which is that this guy needs to move quickly because he is better than the level he's at. And the fact that he was able, that was what struck my attention. Somebody who wasn't necessarily, he was on the radar. Sure. He had a good season. The fact that they were like 3 starts, this is not where you need to be. You need to be at a higher level. That, on the pitching side especially, that tells you something.
Yeah, and the fact that he's 24 years old and already doing well for Double-A maybe opens the door for him to get bumped up again at some point during the 2025 season, which would be exciting if guys in Norfolk, he's on the verge of the big leagues.
Yes, I don't think there's been any 3-level pitchers
in the Orioles history.
In this system, like
they've done it with hitters a bunch.
Yeah, I mean, they did it with hitters. I don't think, and this is also challenging. I was talking about this with our On the Verge buddies last night, but like, it's just a different setup almost. Like, you go from there being, I think their injuries have changed this, but Chesapeake started with 7, 8, 9 like bulk guys. In Norfolk, you have 5 starters, and like there might be some wiggle room. Like, maybe I think they're trying to like stretch out like Rolla and Quintero, but like, Chase McDermott's not going 4 and 75, like, so someone else can come in and throw 4 innings behind him. He's trying to throw 5, 6 innings. Like, Trevor Rogers is going to be built up so he can pitch in the big leagues. So you end up with this weird logjam in Double-A.
Yeah.
Not saying Billy. You end up with this weird so like that is almost the next step of like, okay, how are they going to get these guys to that? Chase McDermott and Cade Povich eventually made that transition, and it took them. Then the reins come off and you're not tandem anymore. You're just going. And then they got to pitch in the big leagues. The way to get guys to the big leagues is to have them pitch in AAA. They have been challenged to get their pitching prospects opportunities to get platformed in AAA. And I think this 2023 draft class is going to challenge that.
The only concern I have about them changing from Bowie to Chesapeake is what happens to Louis Bowie, their mascot.
That's a great question.
Is he tied in a back closet right now? Tied and gagged?
I hope not.
I really hope not. He's a nice guy. I like that guy.
Yeah. I don't know.
Big green furry.
Been down there a couple times recently and didn't see him, but wasn't looking for him.
You need to get to the bottom of this.
Yeah, that's added to the
Or
list.
maybe they just changed his name. Let's get another quick word from our
Jesse.
sponsor. Jesse.
For the 5th year in a row, Toyota is the best resale value brand according to Kelley Blue Book's KBB.com, including the 2025 Grand Highlander, best in resale value for midsize SUVs. Toyota, let's go places.
All right, that just about does it for the Banner Baseball Show. I've kept John far too long. At John Meoli is his handle. I'm at Paul Mancano and at All Banner Sports. And of course, you got to subscribe to the Baltimore Banner, $1 for 6 months. You can get John's newsletter, Inside the Dugout, where he's got much, much more on the Orioles minor leagues, much, much more on the major league team. And he attempts to pull his hair out in order to figure out why the Orioles are struggling the way that they are.
Yeah.
Don't pull out the hair. People love your man bun.
Yeah, we can't let that happen.
No.
Although I've thought about cutting it because if I'm going to be like a tough baseball columnist, I can't be walking around looking like this. I got to be tough.
Disagree. Have you seen Dean Kramer? This is the man bun.
Yeah.
It works.
Rhino Hearn said he was tough last time we saw him. But yeah, this week's newsletter is basically like, might as well just be like a letter to like my wife and my therapist. Like, here's why I've been so crazy lately. But everyone's going to get to read it. So congratulations.
An open letter to my therapist.
Letters to my wife and my therapist that everyone else also gets to read.
Wow. Exciting stuff. Thanks so much for tuning in. For John Meoli, I'm Paul Mancano. I'll be back on Friday with an episode